What's up, you guys? How y'all doing? So Unadilla 2025 is now in the books, and we crowned a champ in the 450 class. And no surprise, it was that number 18 Honda of Jett Lawrence. 2 titles in 3 years is certainly not bad, certainly not Carmichael status, but you know what? A title is a title no matter who's out there and who's not. But I'm going to get to that a little later. I'm going to start with the 250 class. I'm just going to do one video this time. But remember, guys, subscribe. If you think that I'm worth listening to, that's good enough for me. And hopefully I'll have a couple more games up sometime next week. Or at least one anyway. But in the meantime, let's talk some moto. I'm going to start with the 250 class this time. It was a great day for Honda overall. Joe Shimoda makes a bold statement. Haiden Deegan did not look like himself. And I'll tell you this. I thought this was going to be the race where Haiden Deegan was going to lock up the championship. But unfortunately, that was far from happening in that race because Joe Shimoda, oh my God, I don't know what he ate for breakfast, but he better keep eating it for Budds Creek and the playoffs because the way that Joe Shimoda rode, even pulling as much as a 40-second lead in the first 250 moto, that's something you'd expect to see from Ricky Carmichael or James Stewart when they were racing. And Chad Reed wasn't really known for winning by 40 seconds. But, of course, Chad Reed wasn't known for motocross success, even though he does have one title, the 09 450 title. But still, Joe Shimoda, to win a moto by that amount of time, almost 40 seconds, that's a statement in itself. And that takes you back to the days of Ricky and Stewart and maybe to some of the old guys too, like Bob Hanna or Jeff Ward. Although I don't know if they would have. Although I don't know if they won by that amount of time, but you definitely know that if they were banging bars like that or just dominate a race, some of those guys might come up in your thoughts and perhaps they might win by half that amount of margin. But still, Joe Shimoda, he's the only one with a chance at the title. And you never know what can happen as we go to Budds Creek to round out the motocross season. But at this point, everybody's all run down and everything from so many races, which is why I've been really vocal about at least moving the playoffs to after the Donations for the fact that these guys need that long break that they rightfully deserve. Because like I said before, as soon as motocross was over, that was it. It was time for rest and relaxation. And the only times, or the only 2 races that us bench racers like myself, the only 2 races we cared about were the Donations and the U.S. Open that later became the Monster Cup. So what that tells me is that although the 250 class has it a little easier because if you're on the West Coast, you get a break when the East begins, and then you go at it straight for 11 weeks with an occasional break in between. But at this point, I think it is about time that we think about moving the playoffs to after the Donations, just kind of for a more traditional off season, as reference to what I said a little while ago. Because as soon as the outdoor season was over, that was it. It was time for some time off. And the pressure was off. Everyone gets out of shape. And then maybe like around the holiday seasons when they start getting into shape for Supercross 26. And this would have been a good experimental thing because Ironman is going to be hosting the Donations. Joe Shimoda is going to be on Team Japan, and it looks like he might be going to the 450 class soon. But I don't know if that's a smart choice. I mean, has Joe ridden a 450? No. Maybe in his home, maybe in Japan he has, but I don't know. But for Joe Shimoda to go to the 450 class, I think that's not a good idea. And I'll tell you why. Because you don't know if the guy's in shape. I mean, you talk about someone who wasn't in shape for the premier class. Look at Ricky Carmichael in 1999, where he had so many crashes on the 250. And I was one of those guys who really felt that Ricky should have stayed in the 125 class for one more season. Get back-to-back titles and then move up. Or go for a West title. And today, Ricky calls out one of his biggest regrets, that he didn't go for a West title. So, if Joe Shimoda were smart, I mean, if he wants to test the 450 in the Motocross of Nations, okay, let him, because it's only one race. There's no pressure. And, but still, if you're talking about the AMA Supercross Series, I think staying in the 250 class, but running the opposite division might be a better alternative for Joe. If he wants to ride the West again, okay. But I think he might have a better chance at the East title. But that depends on what coast that Seth Hammaker is going to race. Because I'm one of those people who's already calling Seth Hammaker as the Supercross champ for 2026. And if an injury robs him of that title, oh, well. But like Cooksey was saying about Hammaker and his adrenal system, that's pretty serious. And that may very well explain why Hammaker had to take a break so early into the Supercross season, because they ran his body down so much. And for your body to recover from something like that probably takes double the time. I mean, I'm just a bench racer, or just a guy who watches this race for 28 years. And I'm getting tired just going through, and motocross is winding down. I'm already tired of this series. I mean, not the fact that, not upset kind of tired, but more like, okay, fine. I'm getting so winded. I'm still getting tired of waking up early at 7 a.m. just to watch the races. Obviously, because they're on the East Coast. But fortunately, I only have to do that one more time. And that's one of the downfalls of living in Hawaii. You know, everything is 4, 5, 6 hours ahead of you. And especially if you're on the East Coast. But still, I love this sport. And there's no way I'm ever going to leave. I thought I was going to be done after Chad Reed retired, but Marvin Musquin became my savior. And now Chase Sexton is. And now I'm liking the Jett and Hunter Lawrence, that's for sure. And the 250 class is pretty much a crapshoot. You never know who's going to win. But it's gotten to a point where I no longer care for the Outdoor Nationals. I kind of was like that when Chad Reed kind of started sucking again in outdoors. And now Chad doesn't race outdoors anymore. So now it's gone to a point where I don't even care who wins. But I want to see good racing. And this season has not disappointed at all. And Joe Shimoda winning the second moto by only 6 seconds, far less than near 40 in the first moto. But for other guys, it was good to see guys like Ty Masterpool and Cole Davies come back from injury. But I think if you're in the pro circuit camp and you're Ty Masterpool, you're hoping that Garrett Marchbanks gets bumped up to the 450 and factory Kawasaki after how Jorge Prado has done. But for Prado, I'm not really sure why he ended up choosing to ride for Team Kawasaki after he rode for Gas last year. And I think the Gas bike would have been a much better fit for Prado. And now it looks like that. Now, this is only a rumor, or this may only be just a little speculation. But I do hope that Marchbanks gets bumped up to the 450 and Ty Masterpool gets a second chance with Pro Circuit Kawasaki. Because I do believe that Ty Masterpool has kind of been one of those guys where you get started early and it throws your entire routine out. And Ty Masterpool has kind of fallen victim to this. And I do believe he does deserve another chance. And me being a firm believer of second chances, I can think of Max Volan, who was on pro circuit last year, and then he had that dislocated hip, and it knocked him out for the whole year. And I thought that what happened to Max Volan was a major case of injustice. Well, it's going to be double injustice if you look at Ty Masterpool and you look at some of the other guys who've been MIA as well, namely Cameron McAdoo. And what kind of baffles my mind is that McAdoo signed for next year, Ty Masterpool is not. Supposedly, anyway. So I do believe that Masterpool deserves another shot. And I really hope he doesn't go the privateer route, is not forced to go the privateer route again. I mean, you look at Darren Durham, he was putting in good rides on 1110 mods back in 2011, and then he got the ride with Pro Circuit, but he didn't really perform. And look at what happened to Durham's career. And another guy who also falls in this category, Kyle Regal. He put in great rides on a privateer Honda in 2010 in the outdoor series. And then he got signed by Sam Manuel, Yamaha. And one can say that James Stewart kind of ruined Kyle Regal's career as well when you look at how his career ended up. And I think that the Sam Manuel team was supposed to participate in some outdoor nationals, and James Stewart kind of broke the stipulations of that. But again, don't quote me on this, because this is supposed, and I say this emphatically, this is what supposedly happened. Some other people deeper in the industry would have a better idea of that, but I'm just going off of a guess. Okay? So, while I may be right on this, may or may not be, don't quote me on this at all, okay? And I think that if Kyle Regal was treated much better or gotten a much better quality ride than Sam Manuel, he might still be racing. And now he's not anymore. One of those guys that was kind of chewed up and spit out, so to speak. And I don't know what Kyle Regal's up to today. But still, anyway, as far as this racing goes, Joe Shimoda made a bold statement, winning by as much as he did in the first moto, and he really took it to Haiden Deegan. Now, I was wondering why Haiden Deegan was not riding like the Haiden Deegan we saw at the start of the year. Could he be run down from the outdoor season? Possibly. Is it championship stress? That's another factor. And that seems like the likely factor, as Cooksey was saying earlier, like I was watching his video as well. But part of me feels that Haiden Deegan may have come into Unadilla a bit unprepared. Judging by the way he was riding, he wasn't riding like the Haiden Deegan that we saw during the outdoor season early on. That's my take on the matter. So, obviously, Cole Davies being back on a different subject. Cole Davies being back, I didn't expect him to maybe fight for the win, but maybe do better, maybe top 10, but he was nowhere to be found. Same goes for Ty Masterpool, and of course it was his first race back. And Ty was doing pretty well. He was running up in the top 10, but he went down, and that kind of ruined his day after that. And that's where I'll leave it. So I'll be looking for better things from them next week and the finale at Budds Creek. Kind of doubtful that Cole Davies and Ty Masterpool are going to be at the playoffs, considering how their years have gone. But you never know. Now we go to the 450s. Jett Lawrence, your winner and champ. Ken Roxon returns, and DNF's Moto 2. Jett Lawrence being the champ, who didn't see this coming? Let me tell you. Because Jett Lawrence is just 2 notches up on everybody else. And the fact that he's only lost 3 outdoor nationals on the 450 proves that he was full-on ready for the 450 class when he jumped up in the 23 outdoor national season. So obviously he did win because of Sexton being out, and obviously Sexton would have given him a much better run for the title had he had he not had that problem at the opening round. And of course, Eli Tomac, everybody's saying beast mode, beast mode. I say least mode for Eli Tomac because he did not look like himself at all. And once again, Yamaha denied a win in the 450 class at Unadilla. And that's unfortunate for sure. But I was kind of scratching my head as far as Ken Roczen is concerned. I don't know if he was not up to par physically after that crash in Supercross that pretty much ended his year. But then again, Ken Roczen is pretty much Supercross only. And that's a good route to go because he's on Hep Suzuki. And Ken Roczen, being a Supercross only guy, at least he gets a break and he can go into the playoffs a lot more fresher. But at the same time, I do think, like I said earlier, I think it's time we rethink things and move the playoffs to after the donations. Now, for Ken Roczen, if you're in Ken Roczen's camp, you may not care if it's immediately after the outdoor series or after the donations because he does get that much-needed break so his body can recover. But if you're other guys like Eli Tomac and Chase Sexton and Hunter Lawrence and Cooper Webb, you're probably going to want the playoffs to be after the donations just so you can get that much-needed break so your body can recover. So Jett Lawrence winning the title, nobody's predicted that this would not happen. And Hunter Lawrence finishing second as well, once again. This has kind of become the story as well. But a guy that I was looking for to do a lot better than he did, Justin Cooper. I said so many times that Justin Cooper reminds me a lot of Jimmy Button. Well, you may want to add Robbie Rayner to the fold because any given day, Robbie Rayner can blow people's minds with how fast he goes and not translate it to in qualifying or in practice and not transfer to the actual racing. But the problem is Rayner had a bad case of carpal tunnel, which led to a severe case of arm pump. Justin Cooper, I think, is all up here. If that guy can just get past the mental part, he would do a lot better than what he's doing right now. But then again, he did have that crash at Millville, and he hasn't really been the same since. So if I'm Jay Coop right now, it's highly unlikely that he'll be in the – in fact, it's not possible that he will be in the – for Team USA in the donations. But if I'm Jay Coop right now, skipping the playoffs may not be a bad idea, even though it may kind of be frowned upon with the Star Yamaha team, and he is going in with the number one seed. But if I'm Justin Cooper right now, if there are some kind of concussion symptoms, skipping the playoffs may not necessarily be a bad idea. And this is one of the times where I feel like skipping the playoffs may not be a bad idea, and moving the playoffs to after the donations may not be a bad idea. And this would have been a good experiment for that. Because Team USA is not going to have to do any traveling because they're hosting the donations at Ironman Raceway. So that would have been a good experiment for that. But obviously, nobody jumped on that bandwagon. And obviously, I don't think there's going to be a price to pay on one side of the coin. But if you look at it on this side of the coin, yeah, there is a price to pay. Because then we wouldn't have had that kind of experimental thing like I was just talking about. So, obviously, we can only hope Team USA does really well at the donations. I think they will. We got no excuse to do worse than second. And I think that we will win the donations. We got no excuse. And let's hope that happens. So, before I say goodbye, I also want to address Jorge Prado. I thought he was going to do a lot better But it seems to me like his time at Kawasaki is coming to an early end, because the way that he rode was not the Jorge Prado that they know for sure. And something tells me that he may not agree with the chassis or the setup on the bike, because obviously if you got a happy setup, you're happy on the bike. Jorge Prado is not. And I don't think he's been given a fair shot in Supercross. Obviously, an injury robbed him of that. But if the rumors are true and he's looking at KTM, then that might be a better fit. If he rides in the States on either Husky or Gas, but then again, I think Gas is going to be leaving the States. But if Jorge Prado signs with Gas or in Europe, which he can do, or if he rides for Husky or KTM for bonuses, or on his own private team with KTM supplying the machinery, same goes, like I was saying, for Eli Tomac and Yamaha, that might be a better fit for Prado. And maybe, just maybe, he could put in much better results. And if Eli Tomac had gone this route, he probably would be on Yamaha, and Yamaha would be supplying the machinery, just like they did with McGrath. But the problem is costs. I mean, I'd like to hear some of those numbers. If anybody knows what those numbers are, just drop a comment down there. Maybe I might change my tune. But, you know, forming your own team may not be a bad idea, aside from the costs, of course. I mean, that pretty much saved Chad Reed's career. Again, just saying. And that's where I'll leave it. So, anyway, guys, that's all for today. And remember, subscribe. I'll see you all for the final round at Budds Creek.